The sun was setting over the destroyed village, painting the broken buildings in shades of orange and red. Dust hung in the air like a thick blanket. A young soldier walked slowly through the rubble, his boots crunching on broken glass and stones. His uniform was dirty, his face covered in dust and exhaustion. He had been walking for hours, checking every corner, every collapsed building. This was his duty, even though he hated it. The soldier stopped near what used to be someone's home. Now it was just broken walls and scattered belongings. A child's toy lay crushed under a fallen beam. He looked away. These sights never got easier, no matter how many times he saw them. The war had been going on for so long that he sometimes forgot what peace looked like. He heard something, a small sound like someone trying not to breathe too loudly. His hand moved to his weapon automatically, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he listened carefully. There it was again, coming from behind a collapsed wall. He moved slowly, carefully stepping over broken furniture and shattered pottery. Behind the wall, huddled in a small space, was a woman. She looked young, maybe in her mid-20s, but her eyes looked much older. Her clothes were torn and dirty, stained with blood and mud. Her dark hair was tangled and matted. She was injured badly. He could see cuts on her arms and a deep wound on her side that had been bleeding for some time. When she saw him, her eyes went wide with fear. Then something else. Not hope, something darker. She tried to move back but winced in pain. Her breathing was shallow and quick. She was dying, and they both knew it. The soldier raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. But before he could speak, she did something unexpected. She looked directly into his eyes and spoke in a weak but clear voice. "Just do it quickly," she said. "Please, I don't want to die slowly like this." Her words hit him like a physical blow. He had heard many things in this war, but somehow this simple request shook him deeply. He had been a soldier for 3 years now. He had done things he wasn't proud of. He had followed orders that haunted his dreams. But he had never killed someone who asked him to. He had never killed someone who was already dying and defenseless. "I'm not going to kill you," he said quietly, lowering his hands. His voice was rough from not using it much. Soldiers in his unit didn't talk much anymore. There wasn't much to say. The woman laughed, but it came out as a painful cough. "Then you're a fool," she said. "Look at me. I'm already dead. You'd be doing me a kindness." He knelt down beside her, keeping his movements slow and gentle. Up close, he could see just how bad her condition was. Besides the obvious wounds, she looked starved. Her cheeks were hollow, her arms thin like sticks. She had been suffering for a long time, not just from these recent injuries. "Let me at least look at your wounds," he said. "I have medical supplies." She didn't respond, just closed her eyes. Maybe she was too tired to argue. Maybe she had given up. He carefully reached for his medical kit, pulling out bandages and antiseptic. As he worked to clean and dress the wound on her side, he tried to be as gentle as possible. She flinched but didn't cry out. The wound was deep but might not be fatal if treated properly. What worried him more was the infection that might have already set in. And she was so weak from hunger and exhaustion. He pulled out his water canteen and held it to her lips. At first she turned her head away, but then her thirst overcame her resistance. She drank in small sips. As he treated her injuries, he needed to check if there were more wounds he couldn't see. He carefully moved the torn fabric of her clothing, checking her legs for injuries. That's when he saw it. His hand stopped moving. His breath caught in his throat. On her upper thigh, burned into her skin, was a mark. Not a random burn from fire or accident. This was deliberate, a symbol he had seen in intelligence briefings, a brand that a particular brutal group used to mark their prisoners. They heated metal and pressed it into flesh, marking people like cattle. The intelligence report said they did this to prisoners in their labor camps. The soldier had seen many terrible things in this war, but this mark represented something that made his stomach turn. The camps were whispered about among the soldiers, places where people were worked to death, where unspeakable things happened. His commanding officers denied they existed, called them enemy propaganda. But here was proof, burned into this woman's skin. He sat back on his heels, his mind racing. This woman wasn't just a civilian caught in crossfire. She was a survivor of something far worse. She had escaped from one of those camps. No wonder she looked so starved, so broken. No wonder she wanted death. The woman opened her eyes and saw where he was looking. She saw the recognition on his face. For a moment, they just looked at each other in silence. Then she spoke, her voice bitter. "Now you know," she said. "Now you understand why death would be a mercy." He didn't know what to say. What could anyone say? Sorry seemed meaningless. Everything seemed meaningless in the face of that mark. But as he looked at her, really looked at her, he saw something he hadn't expected to see. Despite everything, despite the wounds and the starvation and that horrible mark, her eyes still held something. Not quite hope, but not complete surrender either. A tiny spark of will to survive, buried deep but still there. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She seemed surprised by the question. Probably no one had asked her name in a long time. Probably in the camp she was just a number, not a person. "Does it matter?" She replied. "Yes," he said simply. "It matters." She studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to decide if she could trust him. Finally, she whispered a name so quietly he almost didn't hear it. It was just a name, but in that moment it felt important. It meant she was still a person, not just a victim, not just a branded prisoner. The sun had almost completely set now. Darkness was coming, and with it more danger. He couldn't stay here much longer without being noticed. But he also couldn't just leave her here to die. Something about finding her, about seeing that mark, felt like a turning point. Like fate or chance or whatever you wanted to call it had put him in this exact spot for a reason. He made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. "I'm going to help you," he said, "but you have to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at him with those ancient eyes in that young face. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The soldier didn't know it yet, but in that small dark space among the ruins, something had begun that would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, loyalty, and what it meant to be human in the middle of inhumanity. The night was dark and cold. The soldier had moved the woman to a safer spot, a small cellar beneath what used to be a shop. It wasn't much, but it had walls on all sides and a roof that was mostly intact. More importantly, it was hidden from view. Anyone passing by wouldn't see them unless they specifically came down the broken stairs. He had given her more water and a piece of dried bread from his rations. She ate slowly, as if her body had forgotten how to process food. He watched her carefully, worried she might choke. People who had been starved for a long time couldn't eat normally at first. He had learned that from medics in his unit. "How long has it been since you ate properly?" he asked. She thought for a moment, as if counting was difficult. "I don't know. Months, maybe. In that place they gave us just enough to keep us alive. Barely." He wanted to ask more about the camp, about what had happened to her, but he could see she was exhausted. Her eyes kept closing even as she tried to stay awake. Her body was fighting just to survive each moment. "Rest," he said gently. "We can talk later," but she shook her head. "No, you need to understand. You need to know what you're risking by helping me." She shifted position, wincing as the movement pulled at her wounds. He had bandaged them as best he could, but she needed proper medical care. Care he couldn't provide here and couldn't get without revealing her presence. "They'll be looking for me," she continued. "The people who run that camp. They don't let anyone escape. And when someone does—" She paused, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They hunt them down like animals." The soldier felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected this might be the case, but hearing it confirmed made it real. He was now involved in something far more dangerous than just helping an injured civilian. "How did you escape?" he asked. Her eyes became distant, remembering. There were others, people in the camp who were planning it for months. They watched the guards, learned their patterns, found the weak points in the fences. 3 of us made it out 3 nights ago. I don't know what happened to the other 2. We separated to make it harder for them to track us all. 3 nights ago. That meant she had been running, injured and starving for 3 days. The fact that she had survived this long was remarkable. It showed incredible strength and will, even if she herself had given up hope. "The mark," he said carefully. "I've seen it in intelligence reports. My superiors say those camps don't exist. They say it's propaganda from the other side." She laughed bitterly. It was a harsh sound full of pain and anger. Of course they say that. Because if they admitted the camps exist, they would have to do something about them. And doing something would be inconvenient. He couldn't argue with that. He had learned in his years as a soldier that the truth was often the first casualty of war. Commanders lied to their soldiers. Governments lied to their people. Everyone lied to make the ugly reality seem more acceptable. "How many camps are there?" he asked. "I only know of the one where I was held, but there were rumors of others. Prisoners who were transferred from different places. They all had the same mark, same symbol burned into their skin." She touched the brand on her leg unconsciously, then pulled her hand away as if it burned. They do it when you first arrive. To mark you. To remind you that you're their property now. That you're not human anymore. The soldier felt sick. He had done things in this war he wasn't proud of, but this was different. This was systematic cruelty, organized suffering. This was evil on a scale he had trouble comprehending. Tell me about the camp, he said. Its location. What happens there? Everything you remember. She looked at him suspiciously. Why, so you can report it to your commanders? The ones who say it doesn't exist? No, he said firmly. Because if the camp is real, people need to know. Real people, not my commanders. And maybe, just maybe, something can be done about it. She studied his face in the dim light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. She was trying to decide if she could trust him. He understood her hesitation. Why should she trust an enemy soldier? For all she knew, he could be gathering information to use against her or the others who might have escaped. Why should I believe you? She asked finally. You're one of them. Your side is fighting to take our country. Your side might even be the ones running those camps. He thought about that. She had a point. He didn't actually know who was running the camps. His side? Her side? Some third group taking advantage of the chaos of war? In truth, it might not even matter. Cruelty was cruelty, regardless of which flag it flew under. You're right, he admitted. You have no reason to trust me. I'm a soldier in an army that's invading your homeland. But I'm also a person who's seen too much suffering, and right now I'm the only chance you have. They sat in silence for a long moment. Somewhere outside, a dog was barking. The sound of distant explosions rumbled like thunder. The war continued, uncaring about their small moment of connection in this hidden cellar. Finally, she began to talk. Her voice was quiet but steady. She told him about being taken from her village 6 months ago. How armed men came in trucks and took everyone they could catch. Young people, mostly. People who could work. They were driven for hours with bags over their heads, unable to see where they were going. When the bags were removed, they were in the camp. Surrounded by high fences topped with sharp wire, guard towers at each corner, rows of wooden barracks that looked like they might collapse at any moment. And the smell. She said she would never forget the smell of unwashed bodies, sickness, and despair. They were forced to work 12 hours a day, sometimes more. Building things, she wasn't sure what. Digging trenches, carrying materials. Anyone who couldn't keep up was beaten. Anyone who complained disappeared. They lived on thin soup and moldy bread, just enough to keep them working, but never enough to give them real strength. The worst part, she said, wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion or even the beatings. It was the way they tried to take your humanity. The way they treated you like you were nothing. Like you didn't matter. Like your life had no value at all. As she spoke, the soldier felt something changing inside him. He had been a soldier for 3 years, following orders, doing his duty, trying not to think too deeply about the bigger picture. But listening to her story, he couldn't hide from reality anymore. This war wasn't just about territory or politics or whatever his commanders claimed. Real people were suffering in ways that served no purpose except cruelty. How many people were in the camp? He asked. Hundreds. Maybe 500 or 600 when I left. But people arrived and disappeared all the time. Died from sickness or exhaustion, or were taken away for reasons we never understood. And the location? She hesitated again. This was the crucial information. If she told him and he betrayed her, it could put everyone still in that camp at risk. But if she didn't tell him, her suffering would mean nothing. The camp would continue operating. More people would be branded, broken, and killed. North, she said finally. About 40 kilometers north of here, near the river valley. There's an old factory complex. That's where it is. The soldier's mind raced. 40 kilometers north. That was near the front lines in contested territory. It explained why the camp had stayed hidden. Everyone was focused on fighting, not on what was happening behind the scenes. He realized something else too. His unit had orders to move north in 2 days. They were going to be operating near that area. If he reported this information, if he told his commanding officer about the woman and what she had told him, they might investigate. Or they might not. They might just take her for interrogation. Use her, question her, and then what? He didn't know, and that uncertainty terrified him. But if he didn't report it, he was withholding vital intelligence. That was a serious offense. It could be considered treason. He was trapped between duty and conscience, and he didn't know which way to turn. The woman could see his internal struggle on his face. You're thinking about reporting me, aren't you? she said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. I'm thinking about what the right thing to do is, he replied honestly, and I don't know what that is anymore. She nodded slowly, understanding. Welcome to my world, she said softly, where there are no good choices, only less terrible ones. The night stretched on. The soldier knew he would have to make a decision soon. Dawn would come, and with it, his unit would expect him to return from patrol. He couldn't stay here forever. But he also couldn't abandon her. Not now. Not after hearing her story and seeing that mark burned into her skin. Somewhere in the darkness, a choice was being made. Not by thinking or planning, but by simple human connection. By seeing another person suffering and not being able to look away. 2 days had passed since the soldier found the woman in the ruins. He had made his choice, though he still wasn't sure if it was the right one. Instead of reporting her to his commanding officer, he had moved her to a better hiding place. Old farmhouse stood about 3 kilometers from his unit's position. Abandoned when the war reached this area. The family who lived there had fled or died, leaving behind empty rooms and fading memories. The farmhouse wasn't perfect. The roof leaked in 2 places, and one wall had a large crack running through it. But it had a small room in the back, hidden from the main road. More importantly, it had a working well in the yard, which meant fresh water. The soldier could visit without drawing too much attention. Soldiers often scavenged abandoned buildings for supplies or places to rest. He had managed to steal extra medical supplies from the unit's storage. Not much, just enough that it wouldn't be noticed immediately. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication. He also took food from his own rations, saving portions from his meals. His fellow soldiers noticed he had lost weight, but they didn't comment. Everyone was thinner these days. The woman's condition had improved, but slowly. Her wounds were healing, and the infection that had started to set in was responding to the antibiotics he had given her. But she was still weak. Months of starvation couldn't be reversed in a few days. Her body needed time to remember how to be healthy again. On the 3rd morning, he arrived at the farmhouse with a bag of supplies. She was sitting by the window, looking out at the empty fields. When she heard him enter, she turned. There was less fear in her eyes now, but still a deep sadness that probably would never fully go away. You came back, she said. It wasn't quite a question, but there was surprise in her voice. I told you I would, he replied, setting down the bag. People say many things in war, she said quietly. Most of them are lies. He couldn't argue with that. He had learned the same lesson. Trust was a luxury that few could afford anymore. He started unpacking the supplies, laying out the food he had brought. Fresh bread from the field kitchen, some dried meat, even an apple he had traded his cigarette ration for. She stared at the food as if she couldn't believe it was real. Then slowly, she began to eat. Not quickly like before, but with care, savoring each bite. He noticed she was rationing it, trying to make it last, even though he had told her he would bring more. You don't have to save it, he said. I'll bring more tomorrow. What if you can't, she asked. What if something happens to you? What if your unit moves away? I need to think about survival. She was right, of course. He had no guarantees he could keep helping her. War was unpredictable. His unit could be ordered to move at any moment. He could be injured or killed. The farmhouse could be discovered. Any number of things could go wrong. Then we need to get you stronger as quickly as possible, he said, so you can move on your own if you need to. She nodded, understanding. Then she did something he hadn't expected. She smiled. It was a small, sad smile, but it was genuine. You're a strange kind of soldier, she said. Maybe I'm just a person who happens to be wearing a uniform, he replied. They fell into a routine over the following days. He would visit every morning before his duties began, bringing food and supplies. Sometimes he could only stay for a few minutes. Other times, when he had longer breaks, he would stay for an hour or more. During these visits, they talked. At first, the conversations were practical, how she was feeling, what she needed, whether she had heard or seen anyone near the farmhouse. But gradually, the talks became deeper. She told him about her life before the war. She had been a teacher in a small village. She loved books and children and the simple rhythm of ordinary life. The war had taken all of that away in a single day. He told her about himself too, though he was more hesitant. He had grown up on a farm not unlike this one in a different part of the country. He had been studying agriculture at university when the war started. His family had expected him to stay out of it, to continue his education. But conscription came, and he had no choice. That was 3 years ago. Now, farming and university felt like someone else's life, a dream from a long time ago. "Do you think about what you'll do after the war?" she asked one afternoon. He had never really let himself think about that. Thinking about the future felt dangerous, like inviting bad luck. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Part of me doesn't believe there will be an after the war. It feels like this is just how life is now." "There has to be an after," she said with quiet intensity. "There has to be. Because if there isn't, then what was all this suffering for?" He had no answer to that. He had stopped trying to find meaning in the war a long time ago. One day, about a week after he had hidden her in the farmhouse, she told him something that changed everything. They were sitting in the small back room, and she had been quieter than usual. He could tell something was on her mind. "There's something I need to tell you," she said finally. "About the camp, about why they're so desperate to find people who escape." He waited, sensing this was important. "It's not just a labor camp," she continued. "They're using the prisoners for something else too. I didn't understand it at first, but there were visitors sometimes. Important people, I think, from the way the guards acted around them. They would come and look at us like we were livestock, taking notes, examining us." "Examining you for what?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "I think they're testing things. Medical experiments, maybe. Or trying out new methods of control. I saw people being taken to a separate building. They would come back different, broken in ways that weren't just physical." The soldier felt cold despite the warm afternoon. Medical experiments on prisoners. That wasn't just a war crime. That was something darker, something that spoke to a level of organized evil that he had hoped didn't really exist. "Did they do this to you?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "No, I think I was scheduled for it eventually. But we escaped before that happened, but I knew people who were taken. They came back, wrong. Like something inside them had been destroyed." This information was even more critical than he had thought. If what she was saying was true, the camp wasn't just a place of forced labor. It was a site of systematic abuse and human experimentation. This needed to be exposed. But how? And to whom? His commanding officers had already made it clear they didn't want to hear about the camps. They were focused on military objectives, not humanitarian concerns. If he reported this, they would likely dismiss it or, worse, use the woman as an intelligence asset without caring about her well-being. But there had to be someone who would care. Journalists, maybe, or humanitarian organizations. People whose job was to document war crimes and bring them to light. The problem was, he didn't know how to reach those people. And even if he did, it would mean exposing his own role in hiding her. "What are you thinking?" she asked, watching his face. "I'm thinking that this is bigger than just saving one person," he said. "If what you're telling me is true, there are hundreds of people suffering in that camp right now, and more being brought in all the time. So what do we do?" she asked. It was the first time she had said "we." As if they were partners in this now, not just a soldier and a prisoner he was helping. The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But we need to do something. The question is what and how without getting us both killed." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I've already accepted that I might die. I accepted it the day I escaped. Every day since then has been borrowed time." "Don't talk like that," he said, surprised by the intensity in his own voice. She looked at him curiously. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody to you. Just another victim of this war." He didn't have a good answer. Why did he care? He had seen countless victims, walked past broken bodies and destroyed lives, learned to harden his heart because caring too much would break him. But something about her was different. Maybe it was the mark. Maybe it was her story. Maybe it was just that she was the first person in a long time who had made him remember what it felt like to be human. "You're not nobody," he said simply. And maybe that's reason enough. Outside, the sun was setting again. Another day was ending in this endless war. But inside the farmhouse, two people who should have been enemies were beginning to build something that felt almost like trust. And with that trust came a shared purpose that was far more dangerous than either of them realized. The soldier knew his double life couldn't continue indefinitely. Eventually, someone would notice. Eventually, his luck would run out. But for now, in this moment, he had made his choice. He would protect her, and somehow they would find a way to make her suffering mean something. The third week brought danger from both sides. The soldier noticed it first during the morning briefing. His commanding officer stood before the assembled unit with an unusual tension in his shoulders. Behind him was another man, someone the soldier had never seen before. He wore a different uniform, no insignia of rank, and his eyes were cold and calculating. "Listen carefully," the commanding officer said. "Intelligence suggests that a prisoner escaped from a nearby facility. This person may have sensitive information. Any civilians you encounter should be reported immediately. Anyone found hiding such a person will face severe consequences." The soldier felt his blood run cold. They knew. Maybe not about him specifically, maybe not about the farmhouse, but they knew someone had escaped. The hunt was intensifying. After the briefing, he managed to slip away to the farmhouse earlier than usual. His heart pounded as he approached, terrified he would find it surrounded by soldiers or already searched and empty, but it looked undisturbed. He went inside quickly. The woman looked up as he entered and immediately knew something was wrong from his expression. "What happened?" she asked. He told her about the briefing, about the man with the cold eyes, about how they were actively searching now. She listened without showing much emotion. Perhaps she had expected this all along. "We knew they would look for me," she said calmly. "The question is how long we have before they find this place." "I don't know," he admitted. "Could be days, could be hours. But we need to be ready to move you at any moment." She nodded, already thinking through possibilities. Despite her physical weakness, her mind was sharp. Survival required constant vigilance, and she had learned that lesson well in the camp. "There's something else," he said. "They're not the only ones looking for you." Her eyes widened slightly. "What do you mean?" "I overheard some of the local informants talking. The people who ran the camp, they've sent out their own search parties. Small groups, not official military, moving through villages asking questions, looking for anyone who might have seen an escaped prisoner." This was worse than she had feared. Being hunted by the military was one thing. But the people from the camp, they had different methods. They wouldn't follow rules of engagement or worry about civilian casualties. They would do whatever it took to find her and eliminate any trace of what she knew. "How close are they?" she asked. "Last report had them about 10 kilometers east of here, moving west. They're checking every building, every house, threatening people who don't cooperate." He paused. "They're looking for a woman with a mark. They're telling people to check for the brand." She touched her leg unconsciously, where the mark was hidden beneath her clothing. That brand, meant to mark her as property, was now a death sentence. Anyone who saw it would know exactly what she was. "Then I need to leave," she said, standing up too quickly. She swayed, still not fully recovered. "I'm putting you in danger. If they find out you've been helping me, where would you go?" He interrupted. "You can barely walk more than a few hundred meters without resting. And even if you could, where would you hide? They're searching everywhere." She knew he was right, but the helplessness was eating at her. She had escaped one prison only to be trapped in another, hidden but unable to truly be free. Over the next few days, the soldier became more careful. He varied the times of his visits. He took different routes to the farmhouse, making sure he wasn't followed. He even started deliberately making mistakes in his duties, small ones, so his commanding officer would think he was just tired and distracted rather than hiding something. But paranoia was exhausting. Every conversation with fellow soldiers felt like a trap. Every question from his superiors seemed loaded with hidden meaning. He started sleeping poorly, jumping at small sounds, constantly wondering if this would be the day he got caught. The woman noticed the toll it was taking on him. One afternoon, when he arrived at the farmhouse looking particularly haggard, she confronted him about it. "You can't keep doing this," she said gently. "You're going to collapse or make a mistake that gives us both away." "I'm fine," he lied. "No, you're not. You look like you haven't slept in days. Your hands are shaking. She reached out and touched his arm. I won't let you destroy yourself trying to save me. The touch surprised him. It was the first time she had reached out to him voluntarily. Throughout all their conversations, all the time he had spent caring for her wounds, she had maintained a careful distance. Now that barrier was cracking. I'm not destroying myself, he said, though even he didn't believe it. I'm just being careful. There's a difference between careful and paranoid, she replied. And you've crossed that line. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on both of them. Finally, he sat down heavily on an old chair, exhaustion overwhelming him. I don't know what to do anymore, he admitted. I thought hiding you here would buy us time to figure something out. But the search is getting more intense, not less. And I still haven't found a way to get your story out there, to expose what's happening at that camp. Maybe that's not possible, she said quietly. Maybe some stories don't get told. Maybe some suffering just exists and then ends and the world never knows. I can't accept that, he said with sudden fierceness. If that's true, then what's the point of any of this? What's the point of surviving if no one ever knows what you survived? She looked at him with those old eyes and that young face. The point is living, she said. Just living. That's enough. But was it? He wasn't sure anymore. Every day in this war, he felt his humanity slipping away a little more. The things he had seen, the things he had done, they left marks just as real as the brand on her leg, even if no one could see them. 3 days later, the danger escalated dramatically. One of his fellow soldiers, a young man named Chen, who had always been friendly, approached him after dinner. Hey, Chen said casually, can I talk to you for a minute? They walked away from the other soldiers, and the soldier's heart began to race. Had Chen seen something? Noticed something? I've been watching you, Chen said, and the soldier's blood turned to ice. You've been acting strange lately, disappearing at odd times, coming back with less supplies than you left with. There was no point denying it. What do you want? The soldier asked quietly. Chen looked around to make sure no one was listening. I want to know what you're up to. And I want to know if I can help. The soldier stared at him in shock. What? Look, Chen said, speaking quickly and quietly. I'm not stupid. I can tell you're involved in something. And given the orders we've been getting about finding that escaped prisoner, I can guess what. I don't know why you're doing it, but I know you well enough to know you have a reason. Why would you want to help? The soldier asked suspiciously. This could get you court-martialed or worse. Chen smiled sadly. Because I'm tired of pretending that what we're doing here is okay. I'm tired of following orders that don't sit right in my gut. If you're doing something that actually matters, something that's actually right, then I want to be part of it. The soldier didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to trust Chen. Having an ally would make everything easier. But another part of him knew that trusting anyone in war was dangerous. I can't involve you in this, he said finally. You already have, Chen replied. By being suspicious of you, by watching you, I'm already involved. The only question is whether I'm going to help you or turn you in. The soldier studied Chen's face, trying to read the truth there. He seemed sincere, but so many things in war seemed one way and turned out to be another. Let me think about it, the soldier said. Don't think too long, Chen warned. That intelligence officer who gave the briefing, he's been asking questions about who patrols which areas. He's getting closer to figuring something out. After Chen walked away, the soldier stood in the darkness, his mind racing. The walls were closing in from all sides. The military searching, the camp's hunters approaching, and now an officer specifically investigating. He had maybe days, maybe only hours before everything fell apart. He needed to make a decision, trust Chen and potentially gain an ally, or continue alone and risk making a fatal mistake from exhaustion and stress. Both options were dangerous. Both could lead to disaster. But one thing was becoming clear. The situation couldn't continue as it was. Something had to change. Either they found a way to expose the truth about the camp and get the woman to safety, or they would both be caught. There was no middle ground anymore. That night, as he lay in his bunk pretending to sleep, the soldier made his choice. Tomorrow he would tell Chen the truth. Not all of it, but enough. And together, they would try to do something that seemed impossible. They would try to save not just one woman, but everyone still suffering in that camp. They would try to expose a truth that powerful people wanted kept hidden. It was probably foolish. It was certainly dangerous. But doing nothing had become unbearable. In the darkness, surrounded by sleeping soldiers who followed orders without question, one man decided to rebel in the only way he knew how. By choosing conscience over duty, by choosing humanity over obedience. The choice felt both terrifying and liberating at the same time. The morning came with heavy fog, the kind that made everything feel muffled and distant. The soldier found Chen waiting for him near the supply depot, exactly as they had agreed the night before. Without speaking, they walked together toward the farmhouse, taking a longer route to avoid detection. When they arrived, the woman was already awake. She had heard them approaching and stood tensed by the window, ready to run or hide. When she saw two soldiers instead of one, fear flashed across her face. "It's okay," the first soldier said quickly. "This is Chen, he knows. He wants to help." She looked between them, her body still ready to bolt. "How do I know I can trust him?" Chen stepped forward slowly, keeping his hands visible. "You don't," he said honestly. "Just like I don't know if I can really trust either of you. But your friend here looked like he was about to collapse from stress, and I figured he needed help. So here I am." The directness seemed to ease her tension slightly. At least he wasn't pretending, wasn't making false promises. She had learned to value honesty over pretty words. Over the next hour, they talked. The soldier explained everything to Chen, the full story. The woman added details, showed him the mark burned into her leg, described the camp and what happened there. Chen listened without interrupting, his face growing darker as the story unfolded. When they finished, Chen sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "This needs to get out. People need to know this is happening." "That's what we've been trying to figure out," the soldier said. "But how? We can't go through military channels. They'll just bury it or use her as an intelligence asset." "What about going around them?" Chen suggested. "There are still journalists in the region, organizations that document war crimes. If we could get to them." "How?" the woman interrupted. "I can't exactly walk into a city and ask where the War Crimes Tribunal office is. Anyone who sees this mark will either turn me in or kill me." Chen thought for a moment. "My cousin works for a humanitarian organization. They operate in the gray zones, helping refugees and documenting atrocities. I haven't spoken to him in months, but I know he's still in the region." Hope flickered in the soldier's chest, the first he had felt in weeks. "Can you contact him?" "Maybe. It won't be easy or quick. Communication is heavily monitored, but I have some old channels, ways we used to stay in touch before the monitoring got so strict." Chen looked at the woman. "You'd have to tell your story again. Show the mark. Provide details about the camp's location and operation. It won't be easy. I've lived through worse than telling a story," she said quietly. "If there's a chance it could help others, I'll do it." As Chen left to try to make contact with his cousin, the soldier and the woman were left alone again. The dynamics had shifted somehow. It wasn't just him helping her anymore. They were partners now, working towards something bigger than either of them. "Thank you," she said after a long silence. "For what?" "For not giving up. For caring when you didn't have to. Most people would have just left me in those ruins to die, or turned me in for reward money." "I'm not most people, I guess," he said with a small smile. "No," she agreed, looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're not." The days that followed were both better and worse. Better because having Chen's help meant the soldier could rest more, could share the burden of supplies and secrecy. Worse because they were all increasingly aware of how precarious their situation was. The searches were intensifying. Twice patrol groups came close to the farmhouse, close enough that the woman had to hide in a false wall they had constructed. During this time, something else began to change. The relationship between the soldier and the woman deepened in ways neither of them had expected. They had spent so many hours together talking about everything and nothing. She told him about her life before the war, about students she had taught and lessons she had loved. He told her about his family's farm, about his dreams of sustainable agriculture, about the future he had hoped for before conscription. One evening, as the sun set through the broken window, painting everything in shades of gold and amber, she asked him a question he hadn't expected. "What will you do after this is all over? After the war?" He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Go back to farming, maybe, if there's anything left to go back to. If my family is still there." He paused. "What about you?" "I don't let myself think about after," she admitted. "It feels dangerous, like hoping for something you can't have. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I imagine teaching again. A small classroom, children learning their letters, the smell of chalk and books. She smiled sadly. Silly dreams. Not silly, he said firmly. Necessary. We need dreams like we need food and water. Without them, we're just surviving, not living. She looked at him then, really looked at him as if seeing him clearly for the first time. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just a farmer pretending to be a soldier, trying to figure out how to be a decent human being in a world that makes decency almost impossible. There was a moment of silence, heavy with things unspoken. Then she did something that surprised both of them. She reached out and took his hand. Just held it, her fingers thin and still weak from months of starvation but warm and alive. You're more than decent, she said softly. You're kind. And kindness is the rarest thing in war. They sat like that as darkness fell, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances, holding on to something that felt precious and fragile. Neither of them spoke about what was happening between them, but both felt it. A connection that went beyond gratitude or duty, something that felt almost like hope. Chen returned 3 days later with news. He had made contact with his cousin. The humanitarian organization was interested. They had a journalist embedded with them, someone who specialized in documenting war crimes. If they could get the woman to a safe house 30 kilometers away, the journalist would meet them there. 30 kilometers, the woman repeated. I can barely walk 300 meters without needing to rest. We have 4 days, Chen said. The journalist can only stay in the area for a limited time before it becomes too dangerous. We need to get you there by then. How? The soldier asked. We can't exactly requisition a vehicle without raising questions. I've been thinking about that, Chen said. There's an old truck behind the supply depot. Officially, it's broken down waiting for parts, but I think I could get it running. We could take it at night, say we're transporting supplies to a forward position. It was risky, full of things that could go wrong. But it was also their best chance. Possibly their only chance. Over the next 3 days, they prepared. Chen worked on the truck using his brakes to slowly repair it without anyone noticing. The soldier gathered supplies for the journey, small amounts at a time so nothing would be missed. The woman built up her strength as much as possible, forcing herself to walk a little farther each day despite the pain and exhaustion. On the 3rd night, as the soldier sat with the woman in the farmhouse, she brought up something that had been on her mind. What happens to you after this? She asked. After we expose the camp, the military will know someone helped me escape and stay hidden. They'll investigate. They'll figure out it was you. He had thought about this, of course. He knew what helping her meant for his future, if he even had one. I'll deal with that when it comes. You could be executed, she said bluntly. Helping an enemy prisoner, stealing supplies, going AWOL to transport me. Those are serious crimes, so what would you have me do? Leave you here? Pretend I never found you? Let the camp continue operating? He shook his head. I can't do that. I've seen too much. I know too much. Even if I tried to walk away now, I would carry it with me forever. You're throwing away your life for a stranger, she said, her voice cracking slightly. You're not a stranger anymore, he replied simply. And maybe some things are worth more than safety. Worth more than following orders. Worth more than staying alive if staying alive means staying silent. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, the first he had seen from her. Throughout everything, the capture, the camp, the torture, the escape, she hadn't cried. But now, faced with someone willing to sacrifice everything for her, the emotions she had been holding back finally broke through. I don't understand you, she whispered. I don't understand how you can care this much. Maybe I don't understand it either, he admitted. But here we are. She moved closer to him, and for a moment the war outside ceased to exist. There was only this small room, this moment, these two people who had found unexpected connection in the midst of chaos. Promise me something, she said. What? Promise me that after this is over, after the story is told and the journalist publishes it and the world knows, you'll find a way to survive. Find a way to get to safety. Don't let them make you a martyr. I can't promise that, he said honestly. Then promise me you'll try, she insisted. Promise me this isn't just a suicide mission for you, that you want to live, not just to expose the truth. He looked into her eyes and saw not just a victim he was helping, but a person he had come to care about deeply, more than care about if he was honest with himself. I promise, he said. I'll try. The next night, under cover of darkness, their plan would begin. The truck, the journey, the meeting with the journalist. Everything would be... The night was moonless, which was both a blessing and a curse. Darkness would hide their movement, but it also made the roads treacherous and the journey slower. The soldier and Chen had managed to get the old truck running, though the engine made concerning noises and the headlights flickered unreliably. They arrived at the farmhouse just after midnight. The woman was waiting, wearing clothes Chen had stolen from a donation box meant for displaced civilians. She looked nervous but determined. Her leg still pained her and she moved with a slight limp, but she was strong enough to travel. "Ready?" the soldier asked. She nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." They helped her into the back of the truck, hiding her under a tarp with some actual supply boxes to make it look legitimate if they were stopped. Chen took the driver's seat, while the soldier sat beside him with forged transport papers he had painstakingly created over the past few days. The first few kilometers passed without incident. The roads were mostly empty this time of night. Occasionally they passed other military vehicles, but no one stopped them. The truck's military markings, old and faded as they were, gave them just enough legitimacy to pass inspection. But as they reached the main checkpoint leaving the secured zone, things got complicated. A bored-looking guard waved them to a stop. The soldier's heart pounded as he handed over the forged papers. The guard looked at them with tired eyes, then glanced at the truck. "What are you transporting?" "Medical supplies and food for the forward position at Sector 7, Chen said smoothly, his voice casual. "Nothing exciting." The guard nodded, clearly not interested enough to actually check. He was about to wave them through when another soldier approached, an officer with sharper eyes and more suspicion. "Open the back," the officer ordered. The soldier felt his blood turn to ice. Under the tarp, the woman would be immediately visible if they moved the boxes. Chen glanced at him briefly, a silent question about what to do. The soldier made a decision. He climbed out of the truck and walked to the back, making his movements slow and relaxed. "Sure thing, sir. Just supplies, like we said." He began pulling back the tarp, making sure to only reveal the boxes nearest the edge. The officer peered in, his flashlight scanning the visible supplies. The soldier held his breath, praying the woman stayed perfectly still and hidden behind the boxes. After what felt like an eternity, the officer grunted. "Fine, move along. And next time, make sure your paperwork has the correct date stamp." The soldier's heart skipped. The forged papers had a mistake he hadn't noticed, but the officer was letting them go anyway, either too tired to care or just not wanting the hassle of dealing with it. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir," the soldier said quickly, climbing back into the truck. They drove away slowly, not wanting to seem like they were fleeing. Only when the checkpoint was a kilometer behind them did Chen let out a shaky breath. "That was too close," he muttered. "But we made it," the soldier replied, though his own hands were trembling. From the back they heard a quiet voice. "Is it safe to breathe now?" Despite the tension, they both smiled. The woman's dry humor in the face of danger was something the soldier had come to admire. The safe house was in a small town that had changed hands 3 times during the war. Now it sat in a gray zone, not quite controlled by either side, which made it dangerous but also made it a place where unusual meetings could happen without drawing too much attention. Chen's cousin, whose name was Wei, met them at the door. He was older than the soldier expected, maybe in his 40s, with gray streaking his hair in the kind of deep-set exhaustion that came from seeing too much suffering. "Quickly inside," Wei said, ushering them into a modest house that looked abandoned from the outside, but was clearly being used on the inside. A woman sat at a table in the kitchen, typing on a laptop that ran off a small generator. She looked up as they entered, her eyes sharp and evaluating. "This had to be the journalist. This is Nina," Wei introduced. "She's with the International Truth Commission. She's been documenting war crimes throughout the region." Nina stood and approached the woman, her expression softening. "You're safe here," she said gently. "I know this is difficult, but I need you to tell me everything. And I need to document the evidence." Over the next several hours, the woman told her story again. But this time it was different. Nina recorded everything, took notes, asked detailed questions about dates, locations, the names of guards if she knew them, the layout of the camp, the routines, everything. She was thorough but kind, giving the woman breaks when the memories became too painful. Then came the hardest part. Nina needed to photograph the brand. Medical documentation, she called it. Evidence that could be verified and authenticated. The woman had to expose the mark, while Nina and a medical professional Wei had brought took photographs and made notes about its size, depth, and characteristics. The soldier watched the woman's face during this process. She kept it carefully neutral, but he could see the pain in her eyes. Not physical pain, though the brand was still sensitive. Emotional pain. The humiliation of being treated like evidence, like an object to be documented rather than a person. He wanted to hold her hand, to tell her it would be okay, but he stayed back. This wasn't his moment. This was hers. When it was finally over, Nina sat back and looked at her notes. "This is substantial," she said. "This is the kind of evidence that can't be ignored or dismissed. Combined with the coordinates you've given me for the camp's location, we can build a case." "How long until the story breaks?" Chen asked. "A few weeks, maybe," Nina said. "I need to verify what I can. Cross-reference with other reports, protect my sources. Publishing something like this is dangerous. If I do it wrong, I could put more people at risk." "A few weeks?" the woman repeated, her voice showing strain. "The camp is still operating. People are still suffering there right now." "I know," Nina said gently, "and I wish I could snap my fingers and shut it down immediately. But exposing it properly in a way that creates real accountability takes time. If I rush it and the story falls apart under scrutiny, it gives them an excuse to dismiss all of it as propaganda." The woman nodded, understanding even if she didn't like it. The soldier could see how tired she was, not just physically but emotionally. She had been running on determination and adrenaline. Now, with the immediate goal accomplished, the exhaustion was catching up with her. Wei showed her to a small room where she could rest. Before she left, she looked back at the soldier, her eyes saying what her words couldn't. "Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you." After she was gone, Nina turned to the soldier and Chen. "You two understand the danger you're in now, right? You've gone AWOL, helped an escaped prisoner, brought her across military lines. If you go back, you'll be arrested." "We know," the soldier said. "Wei's organization can help you disappear, get you to neutral territory. New identities, relocation assistance. It's what we do for people who take stands like this." Chen looked at the soldier. "What do you think?" The soldier thought about his unit, about the men he had served with for 3 years. He thought about his family's farm, probably still there, waiting for him to return. He thought about everything he was leaving behind, but then he thought about the woman sleeping in the next room, about the mark burned into her skin, about the hundreds of people still suffering in that camp. And he knew his old life was already gone. The moment he chose to help her, he had stepped off one path and onto another. There was no going back. "We run," he said simply. Over the next few days, they stayed in the safe house while Wei arranged their escape. But things got complicated. Nina's investigation had drawn attention. She discovered that the camp wasn't just a local operation, it was part of a larger network, funded and organized by people with power and resources. And those people had ways of learning about threats. On the 4th day, Wei came in looking worried. "We have a problem. Nina's communications have been monitored. Someone knows she's here, knows she's working on a story about the camps. We need to move you all to a different location." But before they could organize the move, they heard vehicles outside. Military vehicles, and they weren't passing through. The soldier looked out the window and felt his heart sink. He recognized the officer leading the group. It was the intelligence officer from his unit, the one with the cold eyes, the one who had been investigating the escaped prisoner. "They found us," he said quietly. Everyone in the house tensed. Wei quickly began gathering important documents and hard drives. Nina grabbed her laptop. But they all knew the truth. They were surrounded and there was nowhere to run. The woman appeared from the back room, having heard the commotion. When she saw the soldier's face, she understood immediately. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked calmly. "Maybe," he said, "but it's not over yet. Nina has your story. The evidence. Even if they take us, the truth is out there now." "Not good enough," Chen said suddenly. "Nina, can you get your laptop to your editors remotely? Upload everything?" "I'd need time and a good internet connection," Nina said. "And I'd need them to know it was coming, that it was urgent." "Do it," Wei said. "I'll buy you whatever time I can." The banging on the door started. Loud, authoritative, demanding entry. Wei went to answer it, to negotiate, to slow them down. The soldier knew it wouldn't work for long, but maybe long enough. The detention facility was cold and bare. with concrete walls that seemed to absorb any warmth or hope. The soldier sat alone in a small cell, wondering about the others. They had been separated immediately after arrest. He didn't know where the woman was, or Chen, or the journalist and Wei. That uncertainty was its own form of torture. 3 days passed with minimal contact. Guards brought food and water but wouldn't answer questions. The soldier's mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Had they been hurt? Interrogated? What would happen when the story broke publicly? On the 4th day, everything changed. The guard who brought breakfast was different from the others. Younger, and he looked nervous. When he set down the tray, he spoke quietly. The story came out this morning. It's everywhere. News organizations all over the world are running it. They can't suppress it anymore. Hope surged in the soldier's chest. What about the others? The woman, the journalist? I don't know, the guard admitted. But things are changing fast out there. The international pressure is massive. They're talking about investigations, tribunals. He glanced toward the door nervously. I shouldn't be telling you this. Thank you, the soldier said sincerely. After the guard left, the soldier sat in silence, processing the news. They had done it. The world knew. Whatever happened to him now, it had been worth it. But the relief was short-lived. Later that day, he was taken to an interrogation room. The intelligence officer sat across from him, but the man looked different now. Stressed, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. Do you have any idea what you've done? The officer asked, his voice tight with controlled rage. We exposed the truth, the soldier replied calmly. You've created an international incident, damaged relationships between nations, caused chaos in the chain of command. The officer leaned forward. And for what? For one person? One escaped prisoner whose story you couldn't even verify? Her story has been verified now, the soldier said. Or are you denying the camp exists? The officer's jaw tightened. He couldn't deny it anymore. Not with satellite images being analyzed. Not with other survivors starting to come forward emboldened by the news story. The secret was out and there was no putting it back. You're going to be court-martialed, the officer said. Treason, desertion, aiding the enemy. They're talking about execution. The soldier felt fear grip his heart, but he kept his expression neutral. I understand, do you? The officer challenged. Do you really understand that you threw away your life, your future, your family's honor, for someone you barely knew? I knew enough, the soldier replied. I saw what had been done to her. I saw the evidence of what was happening in that camp. And I chose to be human instead of a good soldier. The officer stared at him for a long moment, then stood abruptly. You're a fool, he said, walking toward the door. But before he left, he paused. For what it's worth, the camp is being evacuated. Orders came down this morning. International observers are being allowed in. The prisoners are being released. He looked back at the soldier. So your foolishness accomplished something at least. After he left, the soldier sat alone with that information. The prisoners were being released. Hundreds of people freed because of what they had done. It didn't make the fear go away. Didn't change his own precarious situation, but it gave the fear meaning. Over the following week, the situation evolved rapidly. The story Nina had published sparked international outrage. Organizations demanded investigations. Foreign governments threatened sanctions. The camp became a symbol, a rallying point for everyone horrified by the war's hidden atrocities. Other survivors began coming forward with their own testimonies. The woman's story wasn't isolated anymore. It was part of a pattern, evidence of systematic abuse that could no longer be ignored. International tribunals were discussed. Criminal charges were filed against camp administrators, but while the public situation improved, the soldiers' personal circumstances grew darker. The military needed scapegoats. They needed to show they took the breach of discipline seriously. Making an example of him would demonstrate that even righteous whistleblowing would be punished harshly. His court-martial was scheduled. Chen would face similar charges. They had both known the risks, but knowing and experiencing were different things. The reality of possibly being executed for doing what he believed was right felt surreal and terrifying. Then something unexpected happened. A visitor came to his cell, a civilian lawyer sent by an international human rights organization. The woman who sat across from him in the visiting room looked determined. My name is Rachel, she said. I represent a coalition of organizations that want to help you. We're arguing that you're a whistleblower who exposed war crimes, not a traitor. We're bringing international attention to your case. Will it work? The soldier asked. I don't know, she admitted honestly. Military courts are difficult. They prioritize discipline and chain of command. But with international pressure, we might be able to negotiate something less severe than execution. Maybe a long prison sentence instead. A long prison sentence instead of death. It wasn't much hope, but it was something. What about the woman? He asked. The one I helped. Is she safe? Rachel's expression softened. She's safe. She's being protected by international organizations now. She's giving testimony to tribunals, helping to build cases against the people who ran that camp. She's also been asking about you. Something warm stirred in the soldier's chest at that news. Is there any way I could see her? Or send her a message? I'll see what I can do, Rachel promised. A week later, Rachel returned with news. The military, under intense international pressure, had agreed to a deal. The soldier and Chen would plead guilty to reduced charges. Instead of execution, they would face 20 years in military prison. It was harsh, but it was life. There's something else, Rachel said. The woman wants to testify at your sentencing hearing. She wants to tell the court what you did for her, why it mattered. The day of sentencing came. The courtroom was full of military officers, journalists, and observers from international organizations. The soldier stood in his uniform, stripped of rank insignia, and faced the judge. Then the woman entered. She looked different than the last time he saw her. Stronger, healthier. She had gained weight and there was color in her cheeks. But her eyes still held that depth, that quality of someone who had seen too much. She took the stand and spoke clearly, her voice steady. She told them about being found in the ruins, about the soldier's kindness when he could have left her to die, about how he risked everything to keep her safe and help her expose the truth, about the hundreds of people who were freed because of his choice. This man saved my life, she said, looking directly at the judge. But more than that, he saved my humanity. He reminded me that even in war, there are people who choose compassion over cruelty, who choose truth over convenience. If you punish him harshly for that, you punish the very qualities that make us human. The courtroom was silent when she finished. The judge looked uncomfortable, caught between military law and moral reality. In the end, the sentence came down as negotiated. 20 years. Chen received the same. It was devastating and a relief at the same time. They would live, but they would spend 2 decades behind bars. As the soldier was led away, he looked back at the woman one more time. She was crying, but she also smiled at him through her tears, a small gesture of thanks, of connection, of something that had grown between them in the midst of chaos. That night in his cell, the soldier received a letter that had been approved by his lawyers. It was from her. The handwriting was careful and clear, a teacher's handwriting. I don't have the words to thank you for what you did, it read. You gave me back my life when I had accepted death. You gave voice to suffering that was meant to stay silent. Because of you, hundreds of people are free. Families are being reunited. The truth is known. 20 years is a terrible price to pay for being a good person. But please know that those years are not wasted. Every day of your sentence represents lives saved, truth told, justice served. You are not a prisoner. You are a hero, whether the court recognizes it or not. I will spend the rest of my life honoring what you did. And I will fight to see you freed. This is not the end. It is only a chapter. Wait for me. The soldier read the letter 3 times, memorizing every word. Then he carefully folded it and kept it close to his heart. 20 years was a long time. The war might be over before he was released. The world would change, move on, forget. But he had the letter. He had the knowledge that he had made a difference. And somehow that was enough to face whatever came next. He had been a farmer, then a soldier, then a rebel. Now he would be a prisoner. But underneath all those labels, he was simply a person who had chosen to be human when it mattered most. And that was something no sentence could take away. 5 years had passed since the sentencing. The war had ended 2 years ago, leaving behind a scarred landscape and a population trying to rebuild what had been destroyed. The soldier, now simply known by his prisoner number in official documents, had settled into the rhythm of prison life. It wasn't living exactly, but it was surviving. He worked in the prison workshop, taught younger inmates how to read, and spent his evenings writing letters. Most were to his family, who had stood by him despite the shame his conviction had brought. Some were to Chen, who was imprisoned in a different facility across the country, and many were to her. The woman had kept her promise. She wrote to him regularly, sometimes twice a month. She told him about her work with the international tribunals, about testifying against the camp administrators who were finally being held accountable. She told him about the survivors' support group she had started, helping others who had escaped similar camps deal with their trauma and rebuild their lives. She told him about returning to teaching, working with children who had been displaced by the war. Her letters were his lifeline, his connection to a world beyond concrete walls and barbed wire. Through her words, he could see that his sacrifice had meaning. The camp network had been dismantled. 18 people had been convicted of war crimes. Reforms had been implemented in how prisoners of war were treated. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. In one letter, she told him something that both touched and saddened him. "I think about you every day," she wrote. "About the man who showed me kindness when the world had shown me only cruelty. I carry you with me in everything I do. When I teach, when I testify, when I help other survivors, you are there. Your choice made all of this possible. I hope you know that. I hope it helps during the hard days. The hard days were many. Prison was brutal in ways both obvious and subtle. The physical conditions were harsh, but it was the psychological toll that wore him down. The monotony, the loss of freedom, the slow passage of time. Some days he wondered if he had made the right choice. If 20 years of his life was worth what they had accomplished. But then he would receive another letter. Or hear news about another survivor being reunited with family. Or learn about reforms being implemented because of the exposure of the camps. And he would remember why he had made his choice. Then, in the 6th year, something unexpected happened. An international human rights lawyer came to visit him. Her name was Dr. Kovac, and she brought news that made his heart race. "There's a movement to have your sentence commuted," she explained. "Multiple human rights organizations are petitioning the government. They're arguing that you're a political prisoner, not a criminal, that you exposed war crimes and should be recognized as a whistleblower, not punished as a traitor. Will it work?" he asked, afraid to hope. "It might," she said carefully. "The war is over. The new government is trying to distance itself from the previous regime's actions. Releasing you could be a symbolic gesture, showing they're committed to human rights and accountability. But it's not guaranteed." Over the following months, the campaign intensified. The woman gave interviews, speaking publicly about what he had done. Other survivors joined her, creating a chorus of voices demanding his release. International pressure mounted. Petitions circulated, gathering hundreds of thousands of signatures. The soldier tried not to think about it too much. Hope was dangerous in prison. It could break you if it didn't come true. But late at night, lying on his bunk, he couldn't help but imagine it. Walking free, breathing air that wasn't filtered through bars, seeing her face in person instead of just in his memories and the occasional photograph she sent. Then, in the early spring of his 7th year in prison, the news came. The government had agreed to commute his sentence. He would be released immediately with conditions. He would remain under monitoring for 3 years. He couldn't leave the country without permission, but he would be free. When the guard came to tell him, the soldier thought he was dreaming. But it was real. They gave him civilian clothes, the belongings he had when he was arrested, and walked him to the prison gates. She was waiting on the other side. He saw her before she saw him. She stood by a car, looking nervously at the prison entrance. She wore a simple dress, her hair longer than he remembered. She looked beautiful and real and impossible. Then she saw him. Their eyes met across the distance, and for a moment neither of them moved. 7 years of letters, of imagined conversations, of longing and hope and uncertainty hung in the air between them. Then she was running toward him, and he was running too, and they met in an embrace that felt like coming home after a journey that had lasted lifetimes. She was crying and laughing at the same time, and he realized he was crying too. "You're here," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "You're really here." "I'm here," he confirmed, holding her tighter. They stood like that for a long time, not caring who saw, not caring about anything except this moment they had both wondered if would ever come. Eventually, they got in the car. She drove him away from the prison, and with each kilometer he felt the weight of 7 years beginning to lift. She took him to a small apartment she had prepared, a place where he could adjust to freedom gradually, without overwhelming stimulation. Over the following weeks and months, he learned to live again. It wasn't easy. Prison changes a person, and he found himself struggling with simple things. Choices overwhelmed him. Open spaces made him nervous. He woke up at prison schedule times out of habit, but she was patient. She understood trauma in ways most people didn't. She helped him adjust step by step, day by day, and slowly he began to feel human again. Chen was released 6 months later. His sentence also commuted. The three of them, the soldier, Chen, and the woman, met for dinner in a small restaurant. It was strange and wonderful to be together again. No longer fugitives or prisoners, just people sharing a meal. "What will you do now?" Chen asked the soldier. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything I planned for my life happened before the war. I don't know who I am anymore or what I'm supposed to do." "Maybe that's okay," the woman said gently. "Maybe we all get to figure out who we are in this new world we've helped create." A year after his release, the soldier received an invitation. The International Court was holding a special session to honor individuals who had exposed war crimes at great personal cost. He, Chen, and several others were being recognized. The woman would be speaking at the ceremony. They traveled together to the international city where the court was located. It was the first time the soldier had left his home region since his release. The world felt both bigger and smaller than he remembered. The ceremony was held in a grand hall with representatives from dozens of countries. The soldier felt out of place in his borrowed suit, surrounded by diplomats and officials. But then the woman took the stage to speak, and he forgot about his discomfort. She talked about the camps, about the systematic abuse, about how close the truth had come to being buried forever. Then she talked about the people who refused to let that happen. She spoke about bravery and sacrifice and the cost of doing what's right. "These people lost years of their lives," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "They lost their careers, their freedom, their place in society. They sacrificed everything to expose a truth that powerful people wanted hidden, and because of them, hundreds of lives were saved. Reforms were made. Justice, however imperfect, was served. They paid a price that no one should have to pay for being decent human beings. But they paid it anyway, and that courage changed the world." When she finished, the hall erupted in applause. The soldier felt tears on his cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. After everything, after all the suffering and sacrifice and uncertainty, to be recognized like this felt surreal. After the ceremony, reporters wanted interviews. Officials wanted photos, but the soldier just wanted to be alone with her. They slipped away from the crowds and walked through the city streets as evening fell. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "The choice you made? The years you lost?" He thought about it carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer. "I regret that it was necessary," he said finally. "I regret that the world is the kind of place where doing the right thing costs so much. But do I regret the actual choice? No. Because the alternative was being someone I couldn't live with, someone who saw suffering and looked away, someone who chose safety over humanity." She took his hand as they walked. "What will you do now, really? Will you go back to farming like you always talked about?" "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe something else. I've been thinking about working with refugee organizations, helping people rebuild their lives after conflict, using what I learned, what we both learned, to make things a little bit better for others." "That sounds like you," she said with a smile. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, two people who had been through darkness together, and somehow found light on the other side. The war had taken so much from both of them. Years, innocence, the futures they had imagined. But it had also given them something unexpected. A connection forged in the worst of circumstances, a shared purpose, and perhaps a chance at a different kind of future together. "There's something I need to tell you," she said, stopping to face him.